So our first presenter today is Patricia Flynn. Patricia Flynn is a graduate student in sculpture at UMass Dartmouth. She holds a BS in landscape architecture from Cornell University and has worked for architecture and engineering firms on a variety of land planning projects in Maine, where she has resided for many years. Her experience in the planning and regulatory processes, along with countless hours roaming the woods and fields of Maine, have inspired her to delve more deeply into questions of artistic representation of land and landscape. So I'll turn it over.
Hello, everybody. I want to thank you all for coming out on such a gorgeous day when you could be out in the quad playing frisbee. And I also want to thank the other presenters for bringing such interesting topics. It's a really hard act to follow, but here I go. The mediated landscape in contemporary art. In our times, every aspect of the natural world, including climate itself, is mediated by the activities of humans. Issues of land and climate may very well be the defining aspects of the 21st century. Artist and scientist Natalie Jeremijenko of NYU attributes our relative inaction on these urgent issues to a crisis in agency. The sheer complexity of the political climate around these matters can make us feel powerless as individuals. Like the Dada artists at the end of World War I, artist and activist Julie Perini asks, concerning our times, why then would anyone make art? As someone who cares deeply about the topic of climate and environment, I have long been asking myself how this can fuel my work as an artist. Can artists play a role in addressing Jeremijenko's crisis in agency? What forms might this take? Artists have traditionally represented the natural world as a reflection of the cultural and aesthetic points of view of their time. However, the converse is also true. The way artists represent the natural world is an ideological tool shaping the way in which we envision and construct the natural world, say Adams and Robbins. Witness the influence of the 19th century landscape painters on the decisions of policymakers at the dawn of the preservation movement. In our era of information and sensory overload, what modes of artistic production can engage people on their own terms? How do people create meaning and begin to care about these issues on a personal level? The information coming at us is overwhelming, says Jeremijenko. We have all the information we need about global warming, and it hasn't led to much action. So I think it's about changing who produces the evidence, how it's presented, how it's represented, how it's interpreted, where and why. Because art has the power to evoke a sensory and visceral experience in the audience, and thereby empower personal actions, which aggregate into community engagement and meaningful change. Art can make ideas accessible. Art can pose questions. One thing it does extremely well is to express ambiguity and multiple points of view. Public discourse on these issues often involves a narrowing down of perspective by all sides. This can be alienating rather than engaging. Perini observes, at the root of today's socially engaged artists is creating new relationships, relationships to community, to commodities, to information, and to technology. Natalie Jeremijenko and Chaar Davies work in this way. Jeremijenko's projects are very much rooted in the world, creating engaging interfaces that facilitate actions between humans and non-humans, interactions between humans and non-humans. They're playful and imaginative, conveying information about the environment using real-time interaction. In contrast, with her pioneering work on virtual reality, Chaar Davies brings us to an imaginary world, which immediately jars us out of our habitual modes of perceiving and being. It is an experience of integration and embodiment in the natural world, so unexpectedly profound that many participants have described it as a transformational experience. One of Jeremijenko's many projects is called Muscle Choir, not this choir, but This one of singing shellfish. This is a row of muscles that are wired together in the back, netted inside of a netting. It uses the water filtering activity of mussels to provide real-time monitoring of water quality. By instrumenting mussels with Hall effect sensors, which indicate the opening and closing of their shells, and by giving them each a voice, converting the data into sound, the artwork uses the behavior of the organisms themselves as a biologically meaningful measure of pollutant exposure in order to produce a public spectacle. As conditions change, songs will map parameters such as water depth to sound pitch, pollutants to sound timbre, and the rate of opening and closing of mussel shells to sound tempo. When the shells are open, the track is singing, and when they are closed, there is more of a humming sound, which indicates poorer water quality. Another water quality project called Amphibious Architecture uses light to communicate. Floating tubes with sensors monitor water quality, presence of fish, and human interest in the river ecosystem. The lights shift to red when the water quality is poor, and they shift to blue as quality improves. Citizens can text message the fish to receive real-time information about the river and to contribute to a display of collective interest in the environment. Environmental health clinic. Jeremenko says, I run a clinic that treats health as an environmental issue and environment as a health issue. The clinic is a temporary station which can be set up in various locations of the city. People bring their concerns about the environment and receive recommendations for personal and community action, which counters the pervasive crisis in agency. The second artist I want to talk about, Chaar Davies, is a pioneer in creating immersive, interactive, virtual reality environments. She is best known for two works of the late 90s, which represent a radical departure from the conventions of virtual reality. Conventional design tends to reinforce the Cartesian tradition of dualistic privileging of mind over body, male over female, and human over nature. The Cartesian grid sets up a certain concept of space, which is abstracted and externalized. Conventional VR navigates exclusively by actions of the hand and eye, which further reinforces a detached and dominating mindset. Davies subverts these conventions to create new metaphors of embodiment and participation. The interface offers an experience of total immersion within the VR environment. The immersant remains standing and mobile. Sensors are attached to the chest and back, which monitor the breadth and the position of the torso in space. One breathes in to rise and breathes out to descend, giving a sensation of floating, much like a scuba diver. One's sense of balance controls direction as the immersant bends, turns, and extends the body in space. It is often presented as a performance where an audience can watch in real time a silhouette of the immersant in motion on one screen and what the immersion actually sees on another screen. Another significant innovation is Davies' departure from hard-edged objects separated in empty space. These are some of Davies' early paintings. As a painter, she tends to focus on the spatial qualities of an experience rather than on objects themselves. Similarly, in VR, she uses loose, transparent layers so that one can actually travel within a leaf, root, or seed, or pass through it altogether. Another component is sound. Like the imagery, the sound itself is constantly changing according to position, speed, proximity, gaze, and passage of time. I'd like to read part of one person's written description of the experience because I think it does an even better job of capturing it. I inhale and gradually begin to rise. If I lean forward, I move forward, lean back, and I move backwards. Here, a forest scene with a grid appears as an orienting device and to make reference to the Cartesian grid. The grid quickly and significantly vanishes. Gradually, a thick fog begins to rise over the grid. Leaves appear through the fog and the grid is gone. I move through the leaves, in them, around them. I fly over them, yet more appear above me. It is summer 1 minute and fall the next. I float as if I am swimming deep in the ocean, yet I know I am in the air. There, on the edge, a clearing in the distance. I exhale and begin to descend into the clearing, bend my knees, and I fly faster. Finally, I'm out of the dense forest, a pond, a stream, and a huge oak tree. I glide up through the leaves of the tree. Likewise, the immersion can pass downward into the roots of the tree and then onward into an earth realm, and then into the programming code itself. What is this? Numbers, letters, as if projected from a computer screen? Lines of programming surround me in big green phosphorus figures, DNA, building blocks. The construction of this world, lines of code strung together in 3 dimensions. I move through them, fly over them, and all the while they play their techie, almost goofy tune. I considered playing a video excerpt, but time is short, and I felt that this account actually gave a better sense of the experience than the videos, which are kind of second or third hand. But there are numerous excerpts from the videos online, which you can easily find by searching for Chaar Davies, Osmos, and even here. And so to finish up, I want to say that up until now, I have had the notion that digital technology tends to dissociate us from our bodily experience and from the physical world around us. That's been my bias. Therefore, it is startling to me to realize that digital technologies can actually have the power to reconnect us with a sense of ourselves as embodied beings, and by extension, with our place in the natural world. As Verena Conley writes, rather than simply lamenting the loss of humanness through technology, we can engage in an exploration of its potential for transformation of a worldview that no longer serves the best interests of the planet. Art can empower us to envision new possibilities. That's what you can look up online. Think of the astounding sense of fragility and interconnectedness conveyed by the first images of the Earth from space in 1968. Art is about finding an entirely new vantage point. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. All right, next we have Meaghan Gates. Meaghan Gates is a California native, having grown up in the San Francisco Bay Area. While finishing her BFA at California State University, Chico, she received 2 travel-based grants. She received a CSUC Research and Creativity grant to work at Goldgargard International Ceramic Research Center in Denmark as an assistant and resident artist. She was also the recipient of a Wingate Fellowship that allowed her to work with a production artist in Seto, Japan, participate as a resident at the Shigaraki Ceramic Cultural Park, and participate as a resident at the Sanbao Ceramic Institute in Jingdezhen, China. Her work has been shown in solo and group exhibitions internationally. She is currently attending graduate school at University of Massachusetts Dartmouth as a distinguished art fellow in the field of ceramics. Her current research has been focused on the concept of growth, its biology, and its potential repercussions. Tell us all about it.
Well, like you said, my name is Meaghan Gates, and I'm going to be speaking of bioluminescent organisms and other beautiful natural occurrences. According to Gideon Engler in Aesthetics in Science and Art, he states the idea of aesthetic appreciation and beauty is perceived as an essential feature in modern scientific process. Everyone looks for beauty within their lives. Engler continues by quoting the mathematician and theoretical physicist Hermann Weyl as saying, "My work always tried to unite the truth with the beautiful, but when I had to choose one or the other, I usually chose the beautiful." Science is the art of finding truth within our existence, and this creates the potential to acknowledge the breathtaking possibilities of reality and its potential that surrounds us every day. There are many artists who specifically look towards scientific research in order to legitimize the outcome of their forms. They want to use methodology and conclusion of scientific process to convincingly legitimize their creations. Some examples include Shi Chehuan, Olafur Eliasson, and Tara Donovan. Installation artist Shi Jie Huang creates active environments that successfully combine science and technology with the artist's need to create something new. Huang combines technological mechanisms, scientific research, the living organisms, and single-use consumer materials to create environments that wow the audience around the world. The use of movement, light, color, and sound engage viewers in a manner that seems to be increasingly difficult to achieve in our spectacle-obsessed global community. Having grown up in Taiwan near Electric City, Huang has been long acquainted with the vast collection of random materials that one might expect to find at one of these locations. The transient quality in the content of these shops and the overall atmosphere brings about a sense of whimsy, which affected Huang's personal aesthetics in his work. These are known as electric cities, and they contain an almost endless amount of computer parts that lead people to the creation of all sorts of mechanisms. In Huang's case, he eventually began building bioluminescent creatures that he either places in real environments or constructs new ones for. His animated post-consumer sculptures create awe through the simplicity of materials and the way in which they are put together to reference the living world. In 2007, Huang was awarded a research fellowship to the Smithsonian Institution, where he was able to research bioluminescent organisms for 2.5 months. During his research, he studied the behavioral qualities of numerous aquatic creatures and how it affected their light sensory organisms. He was particularly interested in their defense mechanisms, mating rituals, and symbiosis of their interactions. In this research, his research has since greatly influenced the formal and conceptual qualities of his work. He was inspired by the light patterns of creatures and their movements within their environment. His pieces continue to not have the intention of being read as direct replicas of the living world, but rather as his own interpretations of what he has seen and researched. So I am going to show you a video. Hopefully it works. This is from an installation he did in San Francisco at the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. Now I've got Olafur Eliasson. He's a Danish-Icelandic artist who creates installations that provide multisensory environments for his audience. Each of his works tends to be unique from the rest due to his use of light, color, and sound. They also provide a space for his audience to interact with the work as well as each other. These collective experiences and the dialogue they inspire are very important to Eliasson because he wants people to question their surroundings and what they know reality to be. He's interested in the intersection of nature, science, and human perception. Having grown up in Scandinavia and attended the Royal Danish Academy of Fine Arts, the influence of that region's aesthetics in regards to design and craftsmanship are also very visible in his work. In the mid-90s, he created Studio Olafur Eliasson in Berlin, where he has large teams comprised of architects, craftsmen, scientists, fabricators, curators, and many others who specialize in their specific field of interest. They work together in a laboratory-type situation to make compelling works of art that question reality as we register it and how we work within it. It is within this process that the methodology of science acts as a very important part of its overall studio practice. The team that works alongside Elias and helped make many demanding projects such as the Weather Project at the Tate Modern in London. In 2003, the Weather Project was constructed in the Tate Modern's large turbine hall. It consisted of half of a sphere attached to the ceiling, which was made of monochromatic lamps that gave off yellow light. The ceiling was mirrored so that when visitors came in and looked up, they could see themselves, which caused new dynamic and interaction. Humidifiers were also placed in the room to create a mist that would build up in cloud forms and change the atmosphere throughout the day. He wanted to make a space tangible and to give room for his audience to inquire as to how we dictate reality. Eliason stated, "Every city mediates its own weather. As inhabitants, we have grown accustomed to the weather as mediated by the city. This takes place in numerous ways, on various collective levels, ranging from hyper-mediated experience such as television weather forecasts to more direct, tangible experiences, like simply getting wet while walking down the street on a rainy day. A level between the two extremes would be sitting inside, looking out a window onto a sunny or rainy street. The window as a boundary of one's tactile experience with the outside. Mediates one's experience of the exterior weather accordingly." Why is our presence in the world important and how do we impact it are questions that Eliason wants to bring up in his work. When individuals come to visit the installation, they felt invited to lie on the ground and watch themselves in the mirror. Some would even engage each other by creating new forms with their bodies connected. He was able to set the stage for his concept by having a team of specialists around him who could help engineer and play with the science of how elements will interact and create very convincing environments for those coming and experiencing this work. Finally, Chaar Davies creates Biomorphic Abstractions with his large-scale installations. She displaces everyday items such as styrofoam cups, pencils, buttons, and straws to create forms that overwhelm a space. She is interested in the transient quality of everyday items into forms that take on lives of their own. Her use of multiples creates homogeneous textures that can be likened to surfaces found in the natural world, but nothing can be identified as directly related. She is quoted as saying, "I work very much like a scientist or an architect in the studio. I sort of clean up everything, isolate the materials, and then perform experiments with it." Donovan also stated, "I am mimicking the ways of nature. Thus, using the act of observation, she creates her own kind of biology within each piece through her formal aesthetics and the nature of her material." In her piece titled Untitled 2003 at the Ace Gallery in Los Angeles in 2005, she created a large grouping of styrofoam cups that are attached together with hot glue. They are suspended from the ceiling of the space and they are tightly packed so they look as though they are one plane billowing and undulating. The overall form looks as if it were the surface of a large white cloud. The white translucency of the styrofoam also loses the same quality you might see in a cumulus cloud. While scientists look for beauty within their work, artists use scientific methods to create form and find truth and beauty in their meanings. Without research and experimentation, an artist's work may fall short of presenting their conclusions to the world. They hypothesize about a concept they are trying to elaborate on, and then they experiment with the materials to find out what mediums and tools work best for their ideas. When an artist narrows down what they need in order to be successful, they return to the creation process and create a final work of art. All artists could compare their process to that of a scientist. Step by step, each person experiments, and through trial and error, they create a work of art. According to physicist C. Meaghan, one learns to hope that nature possesses an order that one may aspire to comprehend. And I believe with the art practices of many, we are beginning to peel back the layers of that aesthetic desire. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Lastly, we have Meaghan Walsh. She is a graduating senior at UMass Dartmouth. She'll be receiving her BFA in photography, and her influences include photographers Hiroshi Sugimoto and Uta Bar. Her work will be exhibited at Gallery X in New Bedford, opening on May 8th, and will have to be up until May 18th. So,
I'll be talking about art on the screen and the loss of mediation and remediation of the cinematic experience on the screens. As the whole society is littered with screens and representations of them, for the individual, this means interacting with multiple screens every day. In the J.D. Bolter and Richard A. Gruson essay on the topic of mediation and remediation, they highlight the influx of multimedia experiences society has become accustomed to. They state that we are in an unusual position to appreciate the double logic of remediation, not only because we are bombarded with images in print, on television, in films, and now on the World Wide Web and through other digital media, but also because of the intensity with which these two logics are being pursued in all media. Live point of view television programs show us what it's like to accompany a policeman on a dangerous raid or to be a skydiver hurling through space. Filmmakers routinely spend tens of millions of dollars on film location or recreate period costumes and places in order to make their viewers feel as if they were really there. Internet sites offer stories, images, and now video that is up to the minute, all in the name of perpetual immediacy. Yet these media enact another logic with equal enthusiasm. Websites are often riot of diverse media forms, including graphics, digitized photographs, animation, and video. Televised news programs now feature multiple screen streams, split-screen displays, and composites of graphics and text. For habitual use of screen-based technology, the user learns to put the physical and visual information about the digital platform within our peripheral so that it becomes transparent to the user. The user interacts directly with the information being displayed on the screen. Most of the displays the users have become accustomed to navigating are sites that are remediating the original material where the act of mediation of the material is visible to the user. For most purposes, this form of remediation is not intrusive to the user experience when browsing the web and similar non-media-based activities. But when viewing cinematic material, the remnants of the mediation interrupts the user's sense of immediacy and temporality that the film is attempting to convey. Up until the end of the 20th century, the two most popular and convenient ways to consume motion pictures were either in a movie theater or in front of a television screen. Watching a program in these formats creates a different atmosphere and experience than watching a movie in the theater. In the art of filmmaking, the intent is to mediate reality with such transparency that the viewers assume the film's constructed reality as their own. The magic of cinema is reliant upon the audience's suspension of disbelief so that they can be absorbed into the fictitious reality of the film they are viewing. For the viewer in the movie theater, all the distractions have been eliminated, allowing them to completely engage in the cinematic experience. Watching a film in this setting is most natural for the medium. When the same film is viewed as a DVD or television broadcast, the way in which the viewer experiences the film is different from watching the same film in a movie theater setting. As the DVD, the viewer has control over the environmental setting in which term they are watching the film. They can adjust the lights, volume, and control background noises. Additionally, they control the flow of the sequence of the film, and the viewer can fast forward and rewind scenes in any order they desire, and in doing so, create an entirely new narrative sequence of the movie. Another step further removed from the intended viewing of a film is the television broadcast. In this form, the film can be edited to shorten running time to allow for scheduled programs, remove scenes that are not suitable for the audience, and censor vulgar language. Besides cutting out inappropriate content, television broadcasts will truncate a film to allow for commercials. By doing so, they are breaking the broadcast into predetermined segments. Video hosting and such sharing sites as YouTube or Netflix are filled with multiple windows, buttons, and advertisements that don't allow for the user to have an uninterrupted visual experiences. These interruptions of the visual flow constantly remind the viewer that the content they are watching has been moved here from another, more natural platform of viewing. The alternative is creating a full-screen view of the video, which has two consequences: loss of image quality and the always present advertisement banner over the video, along with a barrage of advertisements, obstacles such as video or audio lagging, colors that are untrue to the original, site crashes or bugs, break the illusion of transparency. That's a slide of mediation in YouTube. Further removed from the setting of the movie theater, the more likely the film will lose its capability to completely immerse the viewer into its constructed reality. A video hosted on a web page is subject to many
forms of mediation and remediation that dilute the viewer's cinematic experience. As a viewer of media on these platforms, I became interested in the amount of distortion that a film is subject to once it is uploaded to the internet. Distortions that cause the most disturbance of the visual characteristics of a film interest me most, such as lagging visuals, pixelization, lack of resolution, and saturation of color. With the power to control the flow of the videos, I navigate through the film or switch among various websites. I begin to mediate with my camera the distortions that occur to the cinematic experience when it is remediated by the internet. The subject matter of the films I photograph stretches across all genres: documentary, music videos, educational or historical material, science fiction, television programs, as well as cinematic films. Most material I have chosen spontaneously while browsing the web, and is chosen either because of its amount of motion, saturation, color palette, quality, resolution, and or contrast within the images. Within the images, I intend to erase the traditional indicators of temporality so that the viewer is forced to make his or own time-space relationships within each image and among a series of photographs. To eliminate these points of reference, I employ long exposure times that are not predetermined but done manually to allow me to compose the image based on what is being displayed on screen. The exposure time ranges from seconds up to half a minute. The spatial relationships that once existed as motion, light, and code displayed on the screen are compressed into a singular photographic plane, and because of that, they are interpreted with a different understanding of temporality. My hope is that the viewer has a unique visual experience in which all traces of remediation are erased and no sense of immediacy is lost. Viewers seem to be moving away from the traditional setting of the movie theater due to the fact that they have several devices in their home or on their person that support video. While the viewer's recreation of the cinematic experience is not always one that strays too far from the atmosphere of the theater, there is something more powerful about viewing the film as an audience in a darkened theater. Some forms of viewing are detrimental to the immediacy of the film, such as watching Netflix on an iPhone during a commute to work. Though it is incredible that we are able to watch our favorite films anywhere, our interaction with them is not one where the viewer is fully submerged into the fictional reality its creator produced. There is no longer a suspension of reality. The viewer becomes aware of the screen's materiality and separates themselves from the constructed world that is being displayed on their screen. As we are able to consume increasing numbers of films at our leisure, the phenomenon of the cinematic experience is vanishing, and we are devouring massive amounts of material, but how much of what is seen is processed as valuable visual experience to the viewer.
All right, we'll now be taking questions. So if you raise your hand, I'll come over to you. Any questions?
This question it's directed to Megan, but actually all of you could answer. Which Megan? I'm sorry, Megan Walsh. It just concerns the screen and a question about digital technology and isolation. It occurs to me that I watched Downton Abbey on my iPhone, the entire series. However, I went to see the Grand Budapest Hotel in the theater last week, and I forgot how much I love going to movie theaters. But I realized that the reason why perhaps movie theaters will go away and we will not watch movies with groups of people is because the distraction of other people is what I think keeps me away from movie theaters. So I only go to them when I can go at a time when I'm alone. So it just occurs to me that with digital technology advancing, I feel like I spend more time alone. And other people feel that way in terms of isolating themselves. You can all answer it.
I guess that's true to some extent. I mean, when I go to a movie theater, I try to pay attention to the movie and not the people around me, but there are other distractions in the theater.
What if you can't help pay attention to people around you? Away from something?
And go to an earlier movie.
Yeah, sure.
questions?
This one's for Patty and Megan. Do you think there's anything lost to art projects or installations where you need a lot of supplementary information to understand what's going on? For example, if you were looking at the piece with the lights and the tubes and water, and you didn't know what it was, do you think the piece loses something?
I think it has to work on both levels, ideally. But personally speaking, when I go to see an exhibit, and it isn't always obvious. I mean, especially if there's a lot of subtext that's referring to various things in philosophical writings and art history. I'm trying to get more familiar with that, but it might refer to something that I am not familiar about. So I do always appreciate when there is some supplementary material to kind of key me in. But I guess in my own work, I want to strive for it to be so that you can appreciate it on both levels.
This is for Patty. I guess building off of what Vicky was saying, I feel like Chaar Davies, like you said, she immerses people into these places without any distractions. There's no way to get distracted if you're completely immersed in something like that. But then, as far as Megan, the first Megan was speaking about, with Eliason, I feel like I went to the rain room at the MoMA over the summer, and people were so into using their cell phones to interact with the space and take pictures of themselves within the space, that how do you think artists will be able to, such as Chaar Davies, be able to keep people in without, the interruption of cell phones and the interruption of constant ads, like Meaghan Walsh was saying. We're constantly bombarded, and with Chaar Davies, I feel like she, although, that might have been 15-ish years ago, she did a good job of completely immersing a viewer into that. And what do we do now to change that? Because I feel like, even with the Shay Wang, you're so tempted now to whip your cell phone out. How, as an artist, do we change that?
About Chaar Davies, I think, I don't know if I made this clear, but the immersion is in their own space, and the whole thing is presented sort of like a performance. I have one slide that showed how the immersion is projected onto a screen, just a silhouette, so you can see them moving or doing whatever they're doing, and you can see what they're seeing while they're doing it on the other screen. And so it's presented like a performance, and I have never seen one, and I don't know how often they're even presented anymore, but I would imagine it's just like any other performance, like if you go to a play or a lecture, or class, it's not really, generally not considered polite to whip out your camera or be making disruption. And so I imagine that at this day and age, there might be a disclaimer or a request made at the beginning, perhaps even. And was there another part of your question? I'm sorry.
artists, do we change the fact that, for the most part, for instance, in the brain room, people are interacting with their cell phones, people are interacting, instead of, fully experiencing it, they're, attached to their cell phone, going to show everybody later, but they're not actually enjoying it. So how do we, as artists, change that, in your opinion?
I think I would have to give that some thought. I think that's a big question and a difficult one, and I would love to hear from if either of you guys have thoughts or anyone in the audience.
Why not? Why not work with it? If you're going to have that distraction there, why not consider that when you're making your work? Or put your work in a gallery that doesn't allow cameras. I experienced similar conditions when I went and saw licensed work in Denmark. Everyone was taking pictures. And it is kind of a bummer when everyone's too concerned with their cell phones opposed to what's literally in front of them. I know I personally make an effort to not bring out my camera and look at the work first and then consider what I would like to document if I can. But you can't, it's really hard to fight what's going to be there. You're not going to be with your work to be able to tell everybody, you can't bring your camera out. They're just going to do that. So my suggestion would maybe be to consider when that does happen, how do you want your work to react to that?
I think we have time for one more question, if anyone has one more.
Thank you. I really appreciate all of your papers. I wanted to introduce the possibility, as you mentioned, Megan, in the center, taking control of the situation by making work that assumes a technological mediation. It assumes that we all have our cameras out. And I was just reading an article by a Harvard art historian named Jennifer Roberts that talked about this process of what she calls slow looking or deceleration, and the idea of an assignment that she gives her students to look at a painting for 2 hours. And the idea of painting and art in general as this highly concentrated experience, something that unfolds in a different sort of temporal framework than what we can get through the digital. And I find that to be kind of an intriguing concept, this notion of a really something that, a painting that might contain within it the potential of 100 clicks on the internet, but that reveals itself over the course of a gradual period of time. And I was wondering if any of you would have something to say about that process, that experience.
Well, I'm not thinking of any concrete examples, but I can understand that phenomenon because sometimes it's years that I look at something or I see something and finally something, I understand it on a certain level, and then finally, eventually something else starts to click, and it's always kind of magical. Did I start to address your question? Okay.
All right, so now we'll be taking a 15-minute intermission, so go out and go to the bathroom, some coffee.